Well, I first have to say, Steve, what an absolute pleasure to meet you.
Well, thank you.
You're one of those journalists I think every journalist looks up to, is inspired by your storytelling.
Wow.
It's magnificent, and I know viewers love that.
Well, thank you. Wow. I was gonna stay no matter what you said.
Well, gotta butter you up first. No, I'm kidding. Talking about storytelling, and that's so important, and it's so critical, especially when you have these incredible shows that you're able to take part of. For you, what is it that makes a good story? What is it that makes it the one?
That's interesting because we do get a lot of suggestions and we go through a lot of ideas. We generally try to pick something that when all is said and done and the story's over, that people will feel something. And ideally, we want people to feel overwhelming joy because news in general doesn't do a great job with joy. We can do fear pretty well and anger, but joy can be elusive sometimes. But I think it's really important. And I think it's more reflective of the real America than a lot of what comes at the beginning of the newscast. So I just think it's really important to have it in there. And if people end the newscast, and our stories always come at the end, feeling optimistic, have their faith in humanity restored, then it's a good day.
This franchise has been around for a long time. Does it make it easier now to weed through some of these stories? I assume they're falling in your lap and you don't have to go out and solicit for them at this point.
No, they're not falling in our lap. Media is so fractured now. There's so many people watching this and that, and so we don't get a lot of people sending us ideas, but that's okay. We'll go out and find them, and my producer scours the local newspapers and goes to the internet and tries to find just the right thing to end the week.
So that is how it works. It's still old-fashioned journalism.
Yes. It's not people sending us ideas generally, no.
That's very interesting.
Yeah.
I would have thought that would have been so much easier
when
since you've been doing
When Charles Kuralt did this job, 50 years ago when he started, people would send in things to CBS because it was just CBS, NBC, and ABC, and everybody watched Charles Kuralt. And he would have a folder. If he's going to Poughkeepsie, he would have like a folder of 100 story ideas he could do in Poughkeepsie. It's not that way anymore. We have to sort of work a little harder to find our ideas.
And speaking of working a little bit harder during the pandemic, we all worked a lot harder. Things changed so much for us. For you, as you storytell around America, but you're not meeting these folks face to face and you're doing it virtually, what was that like? How did that change your perspective?
It was really hard. I do On the Road and all of a sudden I'm in my house. It's not the nature of the segment. We did the best we could over Zoom. I incorporated my children and did some things with them because I'm stuck at home and they're in my office hounding me anyway. Might as well put them on TV. So we did some of that, but I'm glad that it's over because something's lost when you can't go out and actually meet people face to face. And we're going places that CBS News doesn't get to as often. Sometimes it's the back roads, it's the smaller towns, and I think it's important to get out there and represent those folks too.
It is important to represent all of America. And you mentioned your children. They have certainly become part of your storytelling. So are we paying them yet? Or how's that going to work? Do they want to be journalists?
Good question. Are we paying them? No, we're not. But they do ask sometimes. That started because we're stuck at home, and schools around the country had been using our stories to teach character education. We knew this, so that when the pandemic happened and kids were stuck at home, we started something we called Kindness 101, where we took stories and we sort of framed them and used them to teach lessons on empathy or gratitude or honesty, integrity, and it was pretty successful. But we found that and it was meant for kids, but it was mostly adults who were watching this thing. So now CBS is putting that on the broadcast on CBS Mornings. So my kids are now on broadcast television, and I know that they're going to be asking for an increase in allowance because of it.
You're anticipating it.
Yes.
I love that. And I love that you're able to showcase a little bit of your family. That becomes real. The reality of what it's like to work at home for so many people who were stuck.
Yeah, it was really because they would come in and they want to tell me everything. And you don't have to work from home very often, but for those who do, they know it's very hard because you don't get more than like a few minutes at a time before somebody's asking you for something. And I feel so guilty that, can you come outside and play with us? I feel like I have to say yes every time.
And do you?
I do.
And you're a good dad.
Yeah, I guess so.
So does that come first, dad and then journalist?
Yeah, I try to do it that way, but it can be stressful.
I think every parent can probably understand that.
Yeah.
What is it that you think your stories do for people? The ones who are at home, who are watching, what do those stories give to them?
What I'm trying to do through my work is remind people of what America is really all about. And it's about people helping each other, people getting along, whether they're Democrat or Republican. When you come face to face with somebody, you don't care what their politics are, you don't care what their skin color is. People like each other, and I think we need to be reminded of that. And people are good. People are good. You know, there are certain exceptions, of course, but by and large, people are good, and I just want to remind people of that, you know, week in and week out.
Is that your goal for each story?
It is. It is. To reaffirm again, restore faith in humanity, and present a true picture. It's not like I'm presenting just a rosy image of America. I feel like I'm presenting the real picture of what America's all about.
I have to ask, because the news business has changed so much over the years since I've been in it, especially since you've been in it. How is it that you've been able to retain this feature type happy telling of stories? You know, the feel good moments when the push is for hard news, hard and fast, 20 seconds, a minute 20. How have you been able to retain that?
Well, it's funny because, you know, as the news has gotten harsher, let's put it that way, I have worried off and on that maybe my days are coming to an end as a reporter, because I thought there'd be more, like, there isn't room for this kind of feel-good thing that I do. It turned out to be just the opposite. It turned out that there was more of an appetite for it than ever. And so now I'm not worried about losing my job at this point because I do feel like there will always be an appetite for it, and the worse the world gets, the more appetite there is for it.
So it is important.
I think it is important. You know, the way we structure our newscasts, you know, it is a construct. We put the worst story, whatever the worst thing that happened, that goes first for no logical reason. Nobody ever said that. And then the least important, which is usually the life-affirming thing, comes at the end. You know, I've talked to my bosses before. Why don't we switch it around and they laugh at me, but maybe someday.
You just keep pushing.
I keep pushing.
If anyone can do it, Steve Hartman can do it. I know it. That's how it's going to work. I have to ask you, and this is a tough question because you've worked for so many years and done so many incredible stories. Do you have one that stands out? Is there one that is the most memorable for you?
Yeah, I am asked that sometimes, and when pressed, I will say the story of Nora and Dan. And that was a story about a little girl who was in a grocery store, and she saw this grumpy old man, and she asked him for a hug. And what she didn't know, what she would have no way of knowing, is that the man had just lost his wife about 6 months earlier, and he'd given up his reason for living. They hugged, they became friends, and they saw each other every week and gave him a renewed reason to live. And I like that story because it kind of symbolizes all the stories that we look for, in that it was about an insignificant little thing, or seemingly insignificant little thing, that made a huge impact. And I think that's a theme that you'll see through the on-the-road stories, you know, week in, week out, is something that seems so little, but it somehow just really makes a big difference in sometimes one person's life and sometimes many people's lives. And so that's it. When forced to choose, I usually choose that one.
Beautiful story, and tough because you've done so many. You have something that you're talking about for Memorial Day. Speaking of trying to get everybody involved, you've been doing it a couple years. Talk about your endeavor for TAPS.
Okay, well, this started many years ago. I did a story. We'd gotten an email saying, I keep hearing TAPS. I live in Tacoma, Washington. I don't know where it's coming from. So my producer at the time said, well, he started digging down. Let's try to figure this out. And we found a guy named Don Britton who was standing on his porch every day at sunset, and he was playing taps. And we went to do a story on this, like what his motivation was. And what surprised us most on that shoot was that when he would play, other people would come out and stand on their balconies, stand on their porches, and they would stand there hand over heart. And it was a beautiful thing. And I thought, what if all of America could feel what I was feeling in that moment? And years went by, and then the pandemic happened, and there were no Memorial Day parades or ceremonies, so we said, maybe this is the year. So we started TAPS across America, and basically what it is people who play trumpet or bugle, we ask them to stand on their porches or in their front yards and play taps, and if you don't, you know, go out there and just take a moment and we do it at 3 o'clock on Memorial Day, which is the moment of remembrance, and take a moment just to reflect on what the holiday's all about. And we got a huge response, and this is going to be the 3rd year, and we're hoping this becomes like a national tradition where, you know, long after I'm gone, this carries on.
Well, music does soothe the soul,
Yeah.
as I'm sure you have discovered in so many of your stories. Is there anything that you want viewers or other journalists to know about yourself and about your path?
It's funny because, you know, it's been unusual having my kids, you know, in the limelight with me and people being able to see my family, because normally I don't like to focus too much on it, and I still don't want to, because, you know, as a journalist, we're the storyteller.
Right.
And sometimes we do need to be involved in the story, but at the same time, it's about the people that we're profiling, and I wouldn't really want any attention focused, you know, on myself versus these incredible Americans that I get to meet and share their story. That's really what it's all about.
Always the humble storyteller. Thank you.
Thank you.
On the road right here in Las Vegas. We appreciate it.
Thank you.